of Americans said they have investments in Wall Street, in the markets, in mutual funds. So America is invested in this economy. They believe in this economy, and we saw them today split right down the middle. Dan?
Indeed, we did, Anthony Mason. Just to pick up this business about the Electoral College, there's going to be a recount in Florida. This is a very unusual situation in a presidential election under the Electoral College. Stop for a moment. If we didn't have the Electoral College, and I'm not arguing that we should or should not have it, but it's worth considering, imagine a national recount being demanded, not just Florida, a whole nationwide recount, which might very well be the case if an election as close as this one, and that would take months to do. That'll be one of the arguments for keeping the Electoral College. The main reason, the main argument for keeping the Electoral College, whether you agree with it or not to understand it, is to make sure that sparsely populated areas of the country still have some weight in deciding the outcome of the election. Ed Bradley, you had a point you wanted to make now.
Yeah, there's a history of this in Florida with these close elections and recounts. In 1988, you had two congressmen running for the Senate, Connie Mack, the Republican, and Buddy McKay, the Democrat. 3.9 million votes were cast. 3,000 separated the two. 3,000 votes out of 3.9 million. McKay did not concede until 8 days after the votes in 5 large counties had been counted again.
But I can hear someone saying, well, I'm unimpressed by that because we had almost 6 million votes cast in Florida in this presidential election, and about 1/3 of 1% is George Bush's lead. So a much larger election and a much smaller margin, although that is instructive. We've been making the point, overwhelmingly, in elections, whether you're talking about for county commissioner or senator, when you ask for a recount, usually the person who was leading at the time the recount was asked for, usually that person comes out on top. Not to definitely say that that would be the case in Florida, but it might very well be that case. Now, Dateline Florida, the Florida Attorney General says the recount will be open to both camps. Let's listen to what he has to say.
I don't know at this point in time as we're speaking who's the winner. But no matter who the winner is, there has to be a recount. And the 67 supervisors of elections should have that recount as quickly as possible, with the media watching the recount, and also with somebody from each one of the campaigns, as allowed by law, to be there to watch it.
The reason the Florida Attorney General says a recount is mandated at Florida law says anytime it's closer than 1/2 of 1% margin must be a recount. We've said that Bush's lead is about 1/3 of 1% at the moment. 249 to 246 with 270 needed to win in the Electoral College. Florida will decide it. In the overall national vote, Gore leads now by several 100,000 votes over George Bush. Gore may win the national popular vote, and he stands a very good chance of losing the Electoral College vote. We'll be right back. Stay here with us.
For sinus sufferers, it can start with a twinge or perhaps a slight pressure. For everyone, there's a signal. Your sinuses are gonna be trouble. Don't let it happen. Take Sudafed at the first sign. Untreated sinus pressure can escalate to pain. But now, taking Sudafed at the first sign releases pressure, so symptoms don't get worse.
The first sign of pressure, that's my signal.
Stop sinus pain before it starts. Take non-drowsy Sudafed at the first sign.
All it takes is one random spark from a fire, landing in the wrong place at the wrong time, and your whole family's future could go up in flames. Or not. Learn more about or not at thenewsteel.com.
Neutrogena hand cream, developed in Norway for Arctic fishermen to protect their hands. 5 years of clinical tests prove it works better at rapidly healing dry skin and at retaining moisture longer. That's why it's trusted by dermatologists. Neutrogena hand cream, it works better.
Looking to save more and spend less this holiday season? With the Chrysler Holiday Sale, you can do just that. Because now you can save over $2,300 when you buy a new 2001 Town & Country with 4.9% financing. Or choose a $299 lease on the award-winning 2001 Chrysler Voyager. So take advantage of the Chrysler Holiday Sale today for savings that let you spend more on a real holiday priority, yourself.
I will never ask, what do you plan to do with your life?
I will never talk about the things you haven't accomplished.
I'll never bring up the time you came home smelling like that other dog.
I will never worry about where we're going.
As long as you roll down that window so I can pretend I'm flying.
No relationship is like the one with your dog. No dog food is like Purina One brand. And it's made with real meat. No corners cut, complete in every way. For the health and happiness of your dog. Purina One, how great relationships are fed.
He's one of the most decorated Green Berets in history. Now this colonel stands accused of murdering his wife.
What did you kill her with, Colonel? I did not kill her.
But could this American hero be the target of a plot to destroy him?
I loved her. I still love her.
Who killed the colonel's wife? 48 Hours, Thursday.
Back at CBS News election headquarters in New York. So there's no misunderstanding. Bush's lead in Florida, he's had a lead since roughly about midnight Eastern time. But Bush's lead is now down to 1/30th of 1%. That's what a minuscule amount Bush leads in Florida, but put it in the headline, he still leads in Florida, and if he continues to lead and survives the recount, and the odds are considered at least reasonably good that he can do that, Bush can still become President of the United States. In fact, it's advantage Bush because he does still lead in Florida. 1/30th of 1% lead is a lead in the Electoral College vote. 249 for Gore, 246 for Bush, 270 needed to win. Bush clinging to a 1/30th of 1% lead out of 6 million votes cast in Florida. If that lead stands up under a recount bill, then Bush will be the next president of the United States, despite the fact that in the overall popular national election vote, Gore has a several 100,000 vote lead over George Bush. Yes, both are at roughly 48%, but if you do the arithmetic here, you've got, well, Bob, help me out. This lead is down some now. It's certainly a substantial lead for Gore. Gore could, not necessarily will, but could win the national popular vote. However, Bush is still in the hunt for that, and he could come back and take that as well. You might want to know that since 1948, 7 individual state electors have voted against the voters' wishes in their states, saying that it was a matter of principle for them. Bob?
You remember what else happened in 1948, Dan? That was the year that Lyndon Johnson won a seat in the United States Senate. Several million votes cast in the state of Texas, and he won by 87 votes. I always remember it. Lyndon Johnson came to campaign in Fort Worth. I was a little boy then, came in a helicopter, and it scared us all to death.
Well, he did. He became known as Landslide Lyndon, not because he threw his hat down from a helicopter at you and others down in that shopping mall in Fort Worth, but because he won by 47 votes. He won by 47 votes.
87.
87 votes. 87 votes in his Senate race. And my recollection is there were in excess of 2 million votes cast.
Well, and one of the interesting things about that, it turned out that several of the people down in South Texas, about 100 or so, voted in alphabetical order, according to the voting rolls, if you'll remember.
Well, we don't know that we're facing this situation at the moment. That is a famous Duval County down in Texas where things have long since been cleaned up. But in Florida, as of this hour, so far as anybody can make out, all the votes have been clean. Yes, asterisk bottom of the page, there are complaints that in one section of Florida, said to be a section strongly for Gore, there are complaints that somebody, perhaps not purposely, had jiggered the voting apparatus and equipment around in such a way that people who thought they were voting for Gore wound up having their votes counted for Buchanan. But that's an asterisk at the bottom of the page. What the Gore people have asked, and what Florida law, as it turns out, mandates, is that there be a recount to make sure all the votes have been counted, and that all the votes that have been counted in individual precincts have been reported to what we call the central vote counting place. It's a complicated situation. It is unprecedented. We're dealing in political waters in which no Americans have ever been swimming before. The White House may well go to a Republican who may or may not have won the overall national vote. The Senate almost certainly will be in control of the Republicans. The House, their margin will be down, but it looks like a net pickup of only 2 for the Democrats. So we're facing the possibility here, and some would say a probability. You have a Republican-controlled White House, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Republican-controlled House of Representatives. This hasn't happened for the Republicans since 1952 when Dwight Eisenhower beat Adlai Stevenson, who was attempting to succeed Harry Truman. Now, the Democrats have been in the position of having the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, not very often, but in fairly recent years, in the first Clinton term it happened. He had that. Jimmy Carter had it for a while in 1976. Now, the electors are due to meet December 18th, that's less than 6 weeks from now, to make the election official. Hopefully, which Florida electors will attend and will be voting for whom will be settled long before that. This is the way it shapes up. 270 electoral votes needed to win. 249 for Gore, we think, are solid. 246 for Bush, solid. Take you to our map. And on the map, you have a situation in which 3 states have their polls closed, long since closed, but we do not yet know who is the winner. Florida with 25 electoral votes, that's where the presidency now hinges. Wisconsin with 11 undecided. Oregon with 7 undecided. All the states in red, a majority of the states, George Bush has taken. Those with the blinking lights, Nevada, Arizona, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia, all voted for President Clinton in 1996, but they went for Bush tonight. So with all that red there, Bush has clearly carried more states than Gore, but Gore carried the more populous states, including New York, Michigan, Illinois, and California, to say nothing of Washington State, and that's the reason it now stands 249 for Gore, 246 for Bush in the Electoral College race. Now, if you want to have a look at, we've said this Florida race shows a lead for Bush somewhere on the order of 750 to possibly as many as 1,700 votes, which would be about 1/30th of 1% of the 6 million votes cast. And Wisconsin, let's give you a look at this Wisconsin presidential race, if we can get the numbers up. This state's been out there for a long while with 11 electoral votes. It's this close, really, really close, about what? Maybe a not quite a 7,000 vote lead for Al Gore. Nader with 4%. Again, this is another state where Nader may make the decisive difference. And if you want to go out in Oregon, take a look at that vote, a presidential race in Oregon. 7 electoral votes at stake out in the Beaver State. Bush leads Gore 49% to 46%. Again, with Ralph Nader running at about 4%, this is with 75% of the Oregon precincts reporting. But we must continue to underscore and italicize that the race boils down to Florida now. The candidate who wins Florida's 25 electoral votes will be the next president of the United States, and George Bush has been clinging to a lead that once was down as low as about 270 some odd votes. He's now backed up to between 750 and 1,700 votes. There will be a recount in Florida. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. Stay here with us. Wisconsin goes to Gore. 11 electoral votes in Wisconsin. It stayed out there undecided for a long time, going the Gore column. Gore now has 260 electoral votes. Bush 246. Oregon 7 electoral votes are still up for grabs. But, and this is important, it doesn't matter. Whoever wins Florida gets Florida's 25 electoral votes will win the presidency. So Gore is breathtakingly close. But even if Gore were to take Oregon, and at last look he was trailing in Oregon, Gore having gotten Wisconsin, can still win Oregon and not win the presidency. Gore leads in the overall national vote. He leads in the Electoral College vote, but he may very well wind up not being president of the United States because Bush clings to a lead of about 1/30th of 1% out of some 6 million votes cast in Florida. If that Bush lead stands up through a recount, and the probabilities based on history are that it may very well indeed do that, then Bush would be the next president of the United States no matter if Gore winds up winning the overall national vote. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. We have a long way to go here, folks. We hope you'll stay in here with us. We're going to be back. We'll tell you how Oregon goes, when and if we know it's still out there. Florida, they say California is the big burrito. Texas is the big taco. Right now, if you want to follow that through, Florida is the big tamale. It's not only a hot tamale, it's the only tamale that counts up here now. 25 electoral votes. He who wins Florida wins it all. If the children are getting up now and you're about to send them off to school and they say, who's the next president? You just have to say, honey, you know, it's been a historic night. We still don't know, and we may not know by the time you get back from school. In fact, the probability is high we won't. Dan Rather, stay here with us, CBS. Gave me a bad cue or somebody. Dan Rather back at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. The uncharted water in American history. The Republicans have held on to the Senate. They've held on to the House of Representatives. They are breathtakingly close, oh so close, to winning the White House. Gore has just picked up 11 electoral votes in Wisconsin to get to 260 in the Electoral College, but it takes 270 to win. Even if Gore should win Oregon, where he's been trailing, it won't matter. It's all down to Florida. 25 electoral votes in Florida. It once was called by just about everybody for Gore. That was pulled back. Then it was called by just about everybody for Bush. Gore called Bush and saying, well, I want to congratulate you. Then Bush's, what seemed to be commanding lead in Florida, began to evaporate and get down, and it was pulled back into the undecided category, and that's where it stands now. But Bush has a lead in Florida. Oh, so tight is that lead, but the lead, if it stands up to a recount, which is going to be ordered in Florida, and the outcome of the recount we can't know for at least some hours now, and given the overseas absentee ballot situation, it could be days. But Bush still leads in Florida on the order of 750 to about 1,700 votes, depending on to whom you listen. But I repeat, and I keep using the figure because it tells you what a small margin it is. Out of 6 million votes, Bush's lead is about 1/30th of 1%. That's how close it is. Bush's people believe that that lead will stand up into a recount. The Gore people have said, look, we feel a responsibility for a recount. The Attorney General of Florida has said the law mandates a recount when it's this close, anything 1/2 of 1% or below. And the Gore people say, we have a responsibility to ask for a recount. We've asked for it. The Bush people have said, in effect, well, we're not crazy about it, but we understand, and that's where things are at the moment. 270 needed to win. Gore has 260 now, having picked up Wisconsin. Bush has 246, but it's advantage Bush because he has a lead of some few hundred votes in Florida at this moment. Bob Schieffer, in the Senate, no doubt about it, the Republicans are going to have control.
Well, they are. They have now have 50 seats. We still have 2 races to be decided out there. If the Democrats win both of those seats, and they have a chance to win both of them, but if they do, we'll have a 50-50 tie. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. But the other part of it is, Dan, you know, we have some, and I don't know how else to put it, but we have some people that are getting on in age in the Senate. Strom Thurmond is 97 years old. Jesse Helms is 79 years old. They're both Republicans. They're not in good health. If they should have to leave the Senate for some reason or other, their bad health just forced them to resign. In both of their states, you have a Democratic governor, so you would have Democrats appointed to replace them. That could throw the control of the Senate back to the Democrats. There's one other thing to consider here. If Al Gore winds up winning this thing, one of the Democratic seats that they won tonight was Joe Lieberman's seat. He would have to resign to be vice president. There's a Republican governor up in Connecticut. He'd appoint a Republican to replace him. In all those cases, those appointments would be for about two years.
Complicated enough to make your head hurt. Byron Pitts has dropped a dime. He's on the phone again from Florida. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have an up-to-the-minute telephone report from Florida. Gore leads 260 to 246 with 270 Electoral College votes needed to win. But Florida's the whole game, and Bush can still win it.
Walker, Texas Ranger, CBS.
Once Upon a Child presents Magic.
Watch as your children's outgrown clothing, furniture, equipment, and toys magically disappear. Where do they go? Smart parents bring them to Once Upon a Child. We're now stocking up on kid stuff for the holiday season. Convert your children's nearly new holiday dresswear and accessories, toys, and more into extra money for holiday shopping. Don't delay. Bring us your gently used kid stuff today and turn it magically into money.
Oh yes, a brilliant move. Galway scampering across the goal to stop it. They just couldn't seem to get enough players forward before. He's showing good fluid movement. The right, the left. This is another aggressive charge. Darryl Fleck. He's timed his run to absolute perfection. Two defenders to beat. He's passed one. Is it looking like a chance? Yes, he takes the shot in.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Paul and Jennifer, weeknights on KOVR 13 News.
CBS News election headlines of the hour. Wisconsin falls for Gore, but Florida is still the key to the whole election. The polls closed in Florida 11.5 hours ago. We said then it could be the make-or-break state in electing the new president. It was, and it still is. Here's the short version, about as short as we can make it. The Florida call for Bush that put him over the 270 electoral votes needed to win was recalled. In a few hours, they'll start a Florida recount with Bush's lead over Gore there, just 1/30th of 1% out of some 6 million votes cast. It's a margin of in the hundreds of votes, just a few hundred. The presidency of the United States of America is still not decided and not likely to be decided for some hours yet. To make things even stranger, Gore has a several 100,000 vote lead now in the national popular vote. Let's take a look at this national popular vote. The lead for Al Gore is something on the order of, what, a little over 200,000 votes or thereabouts. So we could have a situation where Gore wins the national overall vote and Bush wins the electoral vote if his very tiny margin in Florida holds up. If you're just getting up and thought Bush was elected president, here's what happened while you slept. The Florida call by the television networks operating from a central place where the exit polling information comes in. Each network makes its own decision, but they're all feeding, if you will, off the same exit poll data. The call that put Bush over the top may or may not stand. It's been pulled back because Bush's actual counted vote lead is so tiny. Now, with Bush's lead there knocked back to just a few hundred votes and an official recount coming, it's destined to be hours, possibly days, before we know who the next president of the United States is going to be. Bush's electoral vote count goes back down below the 270 needed to win the presidency. So how did Florida flip-flop, and not just once but twice, or at least flip-flop in terms of the calls? Here's the real deal. Shortly before 8 p.m. Eastern Time last night, Florida was called for Gore, but there were mistakes in a few exit poll precincts and errors in tabulated vote. It's the old story. You put junk into the computer, you get junk out. Bottom line, it was a bad call, human error. When we discovered it, we pulled the call back. That was the call for Gore. The Florida call for Gore was rescinded. That was in the late hours of Tuesday before midnight. Florida put back in the toss-up column. Then, after midnight, Bush's actual counted votes lead in Florida began to build, and Florida was called for Bush, putting Bush over the top with at least, we thought at the time, 271 electoral votes, at least one more than needed to win the presidency. Again, this was not only the consensus, but I think the absolutely unanimous verdict of people who looked at the exit poll information and the other information and said, well, it looks like Bush is going to win it. But as additional votes came in, everybody saw that the Bush lead, which seemed to be in the 50,000 vote range, was shrinking away. It was melting like ice cream in the microwave, and the Bush lead would end up small enough to automatically trigger an official recount. Now, in the face of it automatically, by Florida law, mandating a recount, we did what we thought was the responsible thing under the circumstances and pulled back that Florida call as well, the one for Bush, and that's how we got where we are, which Florida is in the undecided column, but clearly with Bush leading by a few hundred votes. And we've double-checked it. The differential in Florida, the difference is 1/30th of 1% with about 6 million votes cast. Ed Bradley has information about how this Florida recount deal is going to go. Ed?
Well, Dan, there's 67 counties in Florida, and there's what's called a county canvassing board in each of those counties made up of 3 people, a supervisor of elections, a judge, and a chairman of the county commission. They will report to the state election director, Clay Roberts, the results from each of those counties. He will then tally up each county's results and report them to the Secretary of State, who's expected to hold a news conference to announce the results. Now, Bob Butterworth, who is the Attorney General of Florida, who we heard from in the last half hour, he's also the campaign manager in the state for Al Gore, said that it shouldn't take long to count up the votes because many of the votes in Florida are actually counted through electronic means, through computers. Now, he says it shouldn't take long, but he's not specific about what he means about shouldn't take long.
Ed Bradley. Want to recount for those of you getting up. We recognize a lot of people getting up who went to bed last night believing that Bush had won the election. It's 260 to 246 in the Electoral College vote at the moment, with 270 needed to win. Gore got to 260 because he picked up Wisconsin. But with Florida's 25 electoral votes hanging out there, Bush can still certainly win. It's advantage Bush because he leads by a few hundred votes in Florida at the moment. A recount has been called for, but that doesn't mean that Bush is going to lose. And indeed, the odds are still, they're very small, but still weighted ever so slightly in the direction of Bush winning the Electoral College vote. At the moment, the national overall vote total looks something like this, with Al Gore having a several 100,000 vote lead, approximately, over George Bush in the overall national vote. So we do have the possibility, not yet a probability, that Gore could win the overall national vote and Bush would win the Electoral College vote. Bill Whitaker is at Bush headquarters in Austin, having had his huevos rancheros and back at work. What's new, Bill?
Well, Dan, it's ironic that this should now come down to Florida because in a way for the Bush campaign, it's always been about Florida. It's always been central to their election strategy. Since winning the nomination, he has campaigned in the state about a dozen times. And if you look at those Great Lake battleground states, you'll understand why Florida is so important, because Al Gore ended up winning those big states. Now, Bush's brother, Jeb, who's the governor of Florida, promised that he would deliver Florida for his brother. And through the campaign several times, half joking, half seriously, George W. Bush said to his brother that if he didn't deliver Florida, that the family Thanksgiving dinner would be a little chilly. Now, in this bizarre election, it sort of ends up as it began for the Bush campaign, all about Florida. Dan?
Bill Whitaker. And Bob Schieffer, give me a quick pop on this Nader situation, because we know that Nader made a difference in Wisconsin and in Oregon.